The sound of metal on metal stays in your ears longer than you think. A squeal, a crunch, then silence so sharp it cuts. I wasn't even halfway out of the intersection when I realized what had happened. Headlights. Horns. My hands locked on the wheel. And then the sickening stillness that comes only after someone staged a wreck. I sat there, chest heaving, trying to process. The car that had clipped me, a black SUV, sat too perfectly angled, like it was waiting for the hit. Airbags deployed, smoke curling, but no chaos, no confusion. Just calculation. And then I saw him through the cracked windshield. My son, Derek. His wife clutching her arm, face twisted in rehearsed pain. That's when my stomach turned. They wanted me in the seat. They wanted me rattled, guilty, distracted. And I understood exactly why. Derek was broke. Bankrupt. I'd heard the whispers, creditors circling, mortgage in arrears, collection notices stacking like unpaid poker chips. He'd hidden it with bravado, but desperation has a stench you can't mistake. Now I was staring straight at it. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. The crowd began to form. A man shouted, "Call 911." I kept my mouth shut. Derek stumbled out of the SUV, face pale, voice trembling just enough to sound convincing. "Dad, what the hell? You blew through the light." A lie. He knew it. I knew it. But he said it loud enough for the phone's recording. His wife groaned for effect, clutching her side like she'd been stabbed. An Oscar performance, if you didn't know her taste for melodrama. My pulse slowed. Cold replaced shock. They thought they'd written the script. Old man runs a red light, totals his son's car, maybe injures his daughter-in-law. Insurance cuts a fat check. Derek crawls out of bankruptcy, and I take the fall. Simple math. Only problem, they'd forgotten who they were dealing with. 20 years ago, I'd worked inside that very insurance company. Claims, fraud detection, the ugly guts of the business. I knew the loopholes, the traps, the games. And I hadn't walked away empty-handed. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd been quietly feeding a file to an old contact still in the fraud division. Paper trails of Derek's debts, forged income statements, fake accident, claims he'd already tried on smaller scale. I'd sent it all 2 weeks before this little performance. So when the cops arrived, pens clicking, body cams rolling, I gave them exactly what they wanted: fear. Trembling voice, fumbling hands. Oh God, I didn't see him. I let Derek bask in his moment, let him spin his story like a spider weaving silk. And every word tightened the noose. The paramedics wheeled his wife away, neck brace strapped, tears glistening under the flashing red lights. Derek leaned against the hood of his ruined SUV, eyes gleaming like a man who'd just dug himself out of a grave. "You'll take responsibility, right?" he muttered low enough for only me to hear. "Insurance will cover it. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I looked at him. Really looked. My own flesh and blood, willing to destroy me for a check. "I'll take responsibility," I whispered back. But in my head, the words were different. "I'll take you down." The officer handed me a clipboard, voice flat. "Sir, we'll need your statement first thing in the morning. You may want legal counsel." I signed where he pointed. Hands steady now. My role was clear. The curtain had risen. Derek thought he was writing the first act. But this was my play. And by the time the judge saw the evidence, he'd wish that SUV had finished me off in the intersection. The next morning, before heading to give my statement, I opened my safe, pulled out the thick manila envelope I'd prepared months ago, and smiled. Inside was the one thing Derek never expected, proof that this entire crash was a setup and that his debts were tied to men who wouldn't forgive a failed scheme. He thought he'd trapped me. He had no idea he'd just driven himself into a courtroom execution. The courthouse smelled the way I remembered from my insurance days: old wood polish, burnt coffee from the lobby kiosk, and that nervous sweat people try to hide under cologne. I walked in wearing my oldest suit, the one with cuffs that had started to fray. Let them see me as tired, rattled, harmless. Derek was already there. Perfect haircut, rented suit a shade too sharp for his taste. His wife wore a sling like a badge of honor, her face pale but powdered. They looked like victims. They wanted everyone to believe it. Dad, Derek said, voice just above a whisper, remember, just stick to the story. You ran the light. It's simple. Don't make this ugly. I nodded slowly. Simple. Got it. What I didn't say, nothing about this will be simple when I'm finished. The bailiff called us in. The courtroom was smaller than the TV versions, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. A young judge with iron gray hair sat behind the bench, expression carved from stone. To his left, the insurance company's attorney shuffled papers, his jaw tight. I recognized the look. He'd already smelled the rot in Derek's file. The opening minutes were textbook. Officer on the stand. Yes, Your Honor, both vehicles showed front-end impact. Witnesses state the sedan entered the intersection against a red signal. He pointed right at me. My stomach clenched, but not from guilt. From the way Derek smirked when heads turned my way. Then it was Derek's turn. He spoke like he'd rehearsed in the mirror. My father, he just didn't see the light. He's older, gets confused. We tried to avoid him, but his wife dabbed her eyes with a tissue at the perfect cue. We couldn't. We're just grateful to be alive. The judge nodded, scribbling. Every word Derek said sounded like a nail in my coffin. To the untrained ear, it was flawless. To me, it was overacting, arrogance bleeding through. Mr. Williams? The judge's eyes landed on me. Your statement. I swallowed, let my hand tremble just enough. Your Honor, I don't remember the light. It all happened so fast. If it was my fault, then I let my voice crack. I take responsibility. Gasps. Derek's smirk widened. His wife squeezed his hand like they'd just won the lottery. But the insurance attorney stood. Permission to introduce new evidence, Your Honor. That's when Derek's smile faltered. The attorney laid a folder on the table, my folder. The one I'd handed over weeks ago under a different name. Bank records. Emails. Even a voice message Derek left for a so-called friend about the payout he was expecting. Every page screamed fraud. The judge flipped through, eyebrows rising higher with each sheet. The room shifted. Whispers. Derek's wife blinked fast, like she'd just realized her sling wouldn't save her. Mr. Williams, the judge said evenly, did you know your son had filed 3 separate insurance claims in the past 18 months, all under suspicious circumstances? Derek's jaw dropped. That's not, those were accidents. The attorney cut him off. Your Honor, we have strong reason to believe this collision was staged. We are pursuing charges of fraud against Mr. and Mrs. Williams. And, he turned, eyes cold as glass, we intend to seek recovery of damages from them directly. I sat back, hands folded, face still pale and shaky. Inside, I was stone. Derek turned on me then, his voice a hiss only I could hear. What did you do? I looked him dead in the eye. I told the truth. The judge banged the gavel for order, but the chaos had already begun. As bailiffs escorted Derek and his wife out for questioning, Derek shot me a look, not fear, not anger, but something colder. A promise. He wasn't finished. And I knew then the courtroom was just the first battlefield. The phone rang at 2:14 a.m. That's the hour when good news never comes. I let it buzz twice before answering. You think you're clever, don't you? Derek's voice was raw, stripped of the courtroom polish. You humiliated me. You set me up. I kept my tone calm, almost bored. You set yourself up, son. I just watched you dig. A pause. Then his voice lowered, sharp as broken glass. You're going to regret this. The line went dead. I sat in the dark, the glow from the streetlight cutting thin bars across my kitchen table. My pulse was steady. I'd been expecting this. Derek wasn't just angry. He was cornered. And a cornered man doesn't retreat. He lunges. By morning, the game had shifted. A letter slid under my front door. No stamp, no return address. Inside, photocopies of my old insurance files. Not the public ones. The confidential ones. The kind only an employee like me would have handled decades ago. Derek had dug into my past. He was trying to show the court I wasn't some innocent old man, but a bitter ex-employee with an axe to grind. I almost laughed. He thought he'd found my weakness. What he didn't know was that I'd planted those same documents in a secure vault years ago, Annotated, time-stamped, sealed. Everything he thought would smear me would instead prove how long I'd been watching him. That evening, I drove across town to a diner only old men and cops seemed to frequent. In the corner booth sat Frank Morales, my old contact from the fraud unit. He slid a black binder across the table. "You were right, Jack," Frank said, voice low. "Your boy's deeper in than we thought. Gambling markers, payday loans, even his second mortgage he never told the bank about. He's desperate." I flipped open the binder. Photos. Copies of forged checks. Text messages to loan sharks who wouldn't wait much longer. One line made me sit straighter. "Don't worry, I've got a payout coming." "Old man won't see it coming." Frank's eyes narrowed. "You still want to push this in court?" "Because if we do, Derek and his wife aren't walking away with fines. We're talking prison time." I stirred my coffee slowly, the bitter steam rising into my face. My son, my own blood, was ready to watch me rot just to buy himself another month of luxury and debt. "Push it," I said finally. My voice was flat cold. I gave him every chance to be a man. He chose to be a criminal. Frank nodded. "Then buckle up. Once this evidence goes in, the insurance company won't just defend, they'll attack. They'll file a civil suit for damages. Your boy won't just lose. Hello." As I walked out into the cold night, the weight of it hit me. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was demolition. Derek thought the staged crash would fix his life. Instead, it had lit the fuse, and the explosion was coming fast. The next morning, a sheriff's cruiser rolled up outside Derek's house. His wife ran out in her robe, screaming as deputies taped a notice to the door. Foreclosure proceedings, court summons, fraud investigation, all at once. But the real storm hadn't even started. The courtroom was packed tighter than a church on Easter. Reporters lined the back wall, their cameras blinking red like hungry eyes. Derek walked in with his wife clinging to his arm, both dressed as if clothes alone could wash away the stench of guilt. He tried to look calm, but the twitch in his jaw betrayed him. The judge's gavel cracked. "Order. We're here to address new filings brought by the insurance company in response to Mr. and Mrs. Williams' claims. Counsel, proceed." The insurance lawyer didn't waste time. He wheeled in a projector and flicked the lights. On the screen appeared a glossy photo, an SUV nearly identical to the one from our accident. Different state plates. Different date stamp. "This, Your Honor," the lawyer said, voice cold as steel, "is the same vehicle, repainted, reused, and presented in multiple staged accidents across 3 years. Each time, payouts were directed through accounts connected to the defendants." Derek shifted, face tightening, his wife's nails digging crescents into his arm. The lawyer snapped through images, faked collisions, inflated medical bills, signatures that looked far too similar. Then came the audio, Derek's voice, recorded in a voicemail to a creditor. "I'll have the cash once the old man takes the fall. Insurance always pays if he's the one behind the wheel." The room froze. Even the stenographer's keys stalled for a second. Derek's head whipped toward me, eyes blazing like I'd set him on fire. His wife looked ready to faint. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Williams, is that your voice?" Derek stammered. It was taken out of context." "I never enough," the judge snapped. "The court finds strong evidence this accident was deliberately staged. Furthermore, the insurance company's countersuit for damages will proceed." The lawyer straightened. "For the record, our claim is for $1.7 million in restitution and penalties." Gasps filled the room. Derek's wife covered her mouth, tears streaking her makeup. Derek sat frozen, eyes darting, the cocky mask finally stripped. Recess was called. He lunged toward me, voice a venomous hiss. "You think this is over? You ruined me, Dad. You think they'll stop at money? They'll drag me to prison. You did this." I leaned close, keeping my voice low so only he could hear. "No, you did this. You wanted me to take the blame, remember? Consider this your payday." Reporters swarmed as I stepped outside. Microphones jabbed, questions fired like bullets. One caught my ear. "Mr. Williams, how does it feel to watch your own son fall apart under fraud charges? I looked straight at the lens, the sun sharpened my eyes, and gave them what they wanted. It feels like justice finally caught up. But inside, I wasn't satisfied yet. Because I knew something Derek didn't. The insurance company's countersuit was only the beginning. His creditors, very different, very dangerous people, were about to smell weakness. And when they came knocking, Derek would learn what true ruin felt like. You can tell when a man is drowning. He thrashes, grabs at anything, and in the end, he drags down everyone near him. That's what Derek looked like the week after court, drowning in plain sight. The insurance countersuit was all over the papers. Local couple accused of multi-year fraud scheme. Their faces were plastered across the evening news. Even the anchors read the story with that faint curl of disgust in their voices. I watched it over cold coffee and let the words wash over me like rain I'd been expecting for years. But what the headlines didn't mention were the men Derek actually owed, the ones who don't file lawsuits or wait politely for court dates. 3 days after the hearing, I parked across the street from his house just before dawn. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that only breaks when trouble comes knocking. And right on cue, a black sedan rolled up the curb. 2 men in leather jackets stepped out, their eyes sweeping the street the way wolves check a tree line before closing in. I knew their type. Debt collectors who didn't send letters. They went straight to the door. I didn't need to hear the words. I could see everything in Derek's face when he opened up. The puffed chest, the fake smile, the quick collapse into pleading. His wife appeared behind him, clutching her robe, her sling long gone. Funny how fast her injuries healed once the judge smelled fraud. The men were there for sympathy. One shoved a paper against Derek's chest. I couldn't read it from my car, but I didn't need to. It was a demand, payment in full, or something worse. Derek slammed the door after 5 tense minutes, but his mask was gone. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, shoulders sagging, lips moving silently like he was praying. I tapped my steering wheel, calm, because what he didn't know is that I'd fed those wolves his scent. 2 nights earlier, I'd slipped a file into the right hands, copies of Derek's fake invoices, gambling slips, overdue loan markers I'd collected through my old contacts. No name on the envelope, no fingerprints. Just enough to point the sharks toward fresh blood. Call it cruel. Call it justice. But when your son tries to sell you to an insurance company for spare change, you stop worrying about mercy. The next morning, Derek called me. His voice shook. Dad, they came by. I don't know how much they know, but they're saying I owe them 50 grand. I don't have it. They're threatening me. Please, please, you have to help me. I let the silence stretch until his breathing turned ragged on the line. You once told me I should take responsibility, I said finally, my tone even. Now it's your turn. Dad, please, if you don't click. I hung up. For the first time, Derek was feeling what he'd tried to dump on me, fear, cornered desperation, the walls closing in. And he hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. The insurance company had filed motions to freeze his accounts. His house was under foreclosure review. Every creditor, every bank, every shark he'd lied to suddenly knew he was exposed. The storm was converging, and I'd only nudged the winds. I went for a walk that evening, dusk settling over the neighborhood. The air smelled of wet asphalt, that earthy tang before a thunderstorm. My phone buzzed again, voicemail this time. Dad, I'm begging you. I know I messed up, but you're my father. Don't leave me like this. His voice cracked into a sob. Please. They're coming back tomorrow night. I don't know what to do. I replayed it twice. The tears, the panic, the words, don't leave me. All things he never thought he'd say. Standing under the street lamp, I felt no satisfaction, no gloating thrill. Just a cold certainty. This was only the beginning. Because tomorrow, those men wouldn't come back for words. They'd come for payment. And Derek would finally understand what real consequences looked like, consequences no courtroom could soften. And I'd be there, not to save him, but to watch him learn. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. That night, as I locked my front door, headlights swept across my driveway. A car idled outside, engine running. A shape sat behind the wheel, unmoving, just watching my house. Not debt collectors. Not neighbors. Something else. The game wasn't finished. It was just changing. The car outside my house wasn't just waiting, it was prowling. Engine idling low, lights off, the faint glow of a cigarette ember flaring and dying in rhythm. I didn't need a crystal ball to know who it was. When you raise a child, you learn a shadow. Finally, the driver's door creaked. Derek stepped out. Same son who once sat on my shoulders to watch fireworks on the 4th of July, now shuffling up my driveway like a man on parole. His suit was wrinkled, tie half undone, eyes darting like he expected someone to be aiming at his back. I opened the door before his hand touched it. "You've got some nerve showing up here." He flinched at my voice. It wasn't anger that made him twitch, it was recognition. He heard something he hadn't heard in years. Authority. "Dad," he started, voice cracking, "please. I'm out of time. They're coming back tomorrow night. If I don't have the money..." Bill, his throat worked, but the words jammed. He didn't need to finish. I knew. I stepped onto the porch, letting the screen door bang shut behind me. "So, what's the play this time? Another fake accident? Another forged invoice? Or are you here to sell me outright?" His eyes flashed with a mixture of shame and defiance. "It's not like that. I've got a way out. Some investors overseas. They'll cover my debts if I can move money for them. But I need someone who knows the system, someone like you." There it was. Not remorse. Not reconciliation. He was here to use me. "Investors," I repeated, my voice flat. "You mean launderers. You're drowning, Derek, and you're trying to drag me under with you." He took a shaky step closer, lowering his voice like we were co-conspirators. "Look, you don't understand. I don't have a choice. They've got my accounts frozen. The insurance company's suing us. The loan sharks are circling. If I don't fix this, I'm dead. You can save me." I laughed, quiet, bitter. "Save you? After you tried to frame me, bleed me dry, and throw me in front of a judge so you could crawl out of your own grave? You want salvation? Wrong house." For a second, the mask slipped. His shoulders sagged, and he looked more boy than man, eyes wet, voice trembling. "Dad, I'm your son." I stepped back inside, came out with a folder. Thick, heavy, its edges worn from use. I slammed it against his chest. He gripped it like it was a lifeline until he flipped the cover. His face drained of color. Bank statements, forged invoices, credit slips from underground casinos, copies of emails to offshore investors, even text messages to collectors that read like confessions. A neat, surgical record of his rot. His hands shook. "Where the hell did you get all this?" I leaned closer, voice steady as stone. "Piece by piece. While you were busy gambling and lying, I was busy documenting. You think you're clever, but you've been dancing in my spotlight the whole damn time." He tried to rally, jaw tight. "You'd really destroy your own blood? Your son?" "No," I said coldly. "You destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure everyone else sees it too." He opened his mouth, searching for words, but I was done listening. That night, after he staggered back to his car and drove into the dark, I sat at my desk and went to work. The folder became digital fire. Scans, uploads, attachments. With a few keystrokes, I sent everything to 3 places: the insurance company's lead counsel, the state's financial fraud division, and a reporter I trusted to smell blood from 10 miles away. By midnight, confirmations buzzed back. By dawn, the wolves had the scent. At 8 a.m., Derek's investors evaporated. By noon, federal agents rolled up to his house. Neighbors gathered as men in dark suits walked him out in cuffs. His wife sobbed on the porch, mascara running down her cheeks like black rain. Phones recorded every step. Within hours, his mugshot was online, headline bold. "Local man charged in multi-million fraud scandal." I watched the broadcast from my chair, coffee cooling in my hand. Derek's eyes on the screen were hollow, the bravado gone. The same eyes I'd once seen staring at a scraped knee, waiting for me to patch him up. Except now, there was no bandage big enough. I thought that would be the end. But as the anchor wrapped the segment, his tone shifted. "Authorities say the investigation may extend to other family members involved in the scheme. Early reports suggest ties to offshore accounts linked to Mrs. Williams and potentially to a relative identified as Matthew Rogers, nephew of the accused father. The screen cut to a photo I hadn't seen in years. My nephew. I sat back, the weight of it hitting me like a second crush. This wasn't just Derek. The rot had spread further. And I realized the real storm hadn't even begun. The phone rang. Unknown number. I let it buzz 3 times before answering. A calm, professional voice said, "Mr. Williams, we believe your family's fraud is bigger than you know. We'd like to meet. They say rot never stays in one place. You spot it on a floorboard, and by the time you tear it open, the beams are gone, the walls eaten through. That's how corruption works in a family, too." I thought Derek's staged accident and mountain of gambling debts were the end of it. But what I learned next hit harder than the crash itself. The call from the unknown number came just after sunrise. Calm voice, clipped words, no wasted breath. "Mr. Williams, your evidence against your son was valuable. But we believe the fraud is bigger than Derek. If you want the full truth, meet us today. 10 o'clock. Federal Building, 6th Street. Then a click. No room for questions. I arrived early. The lobby smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant, with posters on the walls about whistleblower protections and fraud tip lines. A guard scanned me in, led me down a sterile hallway to a windowless room that felt like it had swallowed more than one manhole. 2 agents waited. Both wore the same gray suits. Both had faces carved by long careers of listening to lies. They slid a folder across the table. The edges were already frayed from use. I flipped it open. My breath caught. Bank transfers, wire slips, company registrations, offshore accounts, and not just Derek's name, my nephew's, Matthew Rogers, my sister's boy. I stared at his face in the photocopied passport photo. Last I remembered, he was a lanky kid asking me for baseball tickets. Now his name was tied to shell companies in Delaware, accounts in Belize, and laundering operations disguised as a boutique his wife supposedly ran. The agent's voice was flat. "Your son's mess wasn't isolated. He's been moving funds through relatives. Matthew is handling transfers. Your daughter-in-law signed off on bogus medical invoices. This wasn't one man's mistake. It's a network." I felt the weight of it press against my ribs. A family tree turned into a crime chart. The agent leaned closer. "Mr. Williams, you've already helped us break the insurance fraud case. But this goes further. If you're willing to cooperate fully, we can dismantle all of it. That means putting your own family on record." The folder was heavy in my hands. Each page a nail, each signature a hammer strike. For a long moment, I just stared at the paper. I thought of Sunday dinners, of birthdays, of Christmas mornings where Matthew and Derek sat side by side tearing into presents, while my sister and I laughed in the kitchen. And then I thought of the brick through my window, the staged crash, the cold look in Derek's eyes when he whispered, "You'll take the fall." "Do it," I said. My voice didn't shake. "Burn every one of them." That afternoon, I asked for a visit with Derek. County lockup. The kind of place that smells like metal and sweat, where the air buzzes with fluorescent lights and hopelessness. They brought him into the booth, cuffs on his wrists, eyes dull but burning underneath. We picked up the phones, glass between us. He didn't wait for me to speak. "You proud of yourself? Your own son in chains. You couldn't help me, could you? Had to bury me." I leaned forward, eyes steady. "I didn't bury you. I just pulled back the dirt so everyone else could see the hole you dug." His jaw clenched. "You don't understand. I was desperate. I had no choice." "You always had a choice," I snapped. "You chose gambling. You chose fraud. You chose to frame your father to crawl out of your own grave. And now it's not just you. It's Matthew. Your wife. You dragged them all in." For the first time I saw it. Not anger. Not defiance. Fear. Real, bone-deep fear. He slammed the phone down, lips still moving as the guard led him away. I stayed there, phone to my ear, listening to the dead hum of the line. The raids came 2 days later. Dawn lights spilling over quiet neighborhoods, shattered by flashing red and blue. I drove past Matthew's McMansion just as federal agents swarmed. Neighbors in bathrobes lined the sidewalks, arms crossed, eyes wide as agents carried boxes out the door, computers, files, even the gun safe from the basement. His kids watched from the upstairs window, faces pale as paper. The evening news went for the jugular. Family fraud ring exposed, uncle's testimony central to case. They said my name on air. My face flashed across the screen. For decades, I'd been the quiet one, the man who kept his head down, who solved his problems alone. Now the whole city knew, and the city knew I'd gutted my own bloodline. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years cursed me, spitting venom into the receiver. Old friends from church whispered thanks for my courage. Strangers wrote letters, some saying I'd done right, some calling me a monster. I answered none of them. That night, a storm rolled in. The wind rattled the windows. Rain hammered the roof. I sat at my kitchen table with photographs spread before me. Derek, age 7, holding up his first fish. Matthew at 12, a baseball bat too heavy for his thin arms. Smiles wide, eyes full of trust. I let myself feel it: grief, rage, betrayal. Then I pushed it all down. Tomorrow I'd testify again. Tomorrow I'd drive the final nail. Just before dawn, my phone rang. Unknown number again. I answered. The voice was low, calm, deliberate. Mr. Williams, you don't know us, but we know your son owes us $50,000, plus interest. You cost us money. That means you have a choice. Pay what he owes, or we collect another way. The line went dead. I stood in the kitchen, mug cooling in my hand, listening to the rain ease into silence. And then it hit me: Derek wasn't just my enemy anymore. His enemies were mine now. Loan sharks don't care about bloodlines. They collect from whoever's standing. That night, the proof arrived. A crash of glass shattered the quiet. My living room window exploded inward, shards skittering across the floor. On the rug lay a brick wrapped in duct tape. I tore it open. A single note inside, thick black marker scrawled in block letters: pays debt or we collect in blood. My blood ran cold, but my hands were steady. They thought they could scare me into cleaning up Derek's mess. They thought I'd bend. They didn't know me. This wasn't the end of the war. It was only the start of the last battle. I swept the glass into a pile, folded the note carefully, and slipped it into the same folder that had already destroyed my son. Tomorrow, I'd take this new evidence to the agents. But tonight, I sat alone in the dark, staring at the broken window, waiting. Because I knew they'd come back, and when they did, I'd be ready. The night after the brick, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark with the folder on my lap, the note folded neatly inside. The house creaked with the storm still lingering, and every sound could have been a footstep. I wasn't afraid. I was waiting. By sunrise, I had a plan. 40 years working inside the insurance industry had taught me one lesson above all: paper beats muscle. Thugs can break bones, but documents break empires. And I had documents. I called my contact at the fraud division. Calm voice, clipped as always. Bring everything. We'll move today. By noon, I was in their office again. This time, I slid the note across the table, the threats against me, the proof Derek's debts weren't just numbers, but blood markers. The agents didn't blink. They'd seen this play before. But when I opened my folder, their eyes sharpened. Bank transfers linked Derek to those collectors. Gambling slips with coded initials. Even surveillance photos of meetings and parking lots I'd tracked for weeks. My son hadn't just fallen into debt. He'd crawled into bed with men who fed on desperation. The lead agent leaned back. Mr. Williams, with this, we don't just have fraud. We have racketeering. We have organized crime. And with your testimony, he tapped the folder, we can end it. That evening, it ended. The news broke before midnight. Multi-state fraud and laundering ring exposed. Local family at center of investigation. The screen showed Derek in chains again, this time flanked by 2 other faces, his wife and my nephew Matthew. Their so-called investors were arrested the same day. The collectors too, the ones who thought they could threaten me into silence. Turns out, when you funnel money through fake clinics and offshore shells, you leave a trail. And I knew exactly where to point. The courtroom finale was almost anticlimactic. The judge read charges that stacked higher than the courthouse doors: fraud, laundering, conspiracy, racketeering. Each word another brick on their shoulders. Derek sat slumped, eyes empty, the fight gone. His wife wept quietly beside him. Matthew stared at the floor. And me? I sat in the gallery, still, silent, watching the wreckage of my family unfold. When it was over, when the gavel fell for the last time, I stepped outside. Cameras swarmed. Reporters shouted. "Mr. Williams, do you feel vindicated?" I looked at the crowd, at the flashes popping like fireworks, at the microphones shoved toward my face. My voice was steady, sharp. "I feel free." I walked past them, the spring air cutting cool against my skin. For the first time in months, I breathed deep. The house I'd built might have been surrounded by betrayal, but I had torn the rot out by the roots. They had tried to bury me under lies, under debt, under fear. Instead, they buried themselves. I wasn't the one left broken, they were. And that's how I closed the circle. If you liked the story, please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and write in the comments if something like this has ever happened in your life. I'd love to hear your stories. Thank you for watching.